Marva.
I'm Gracie.
And I'm Yuritsa.
And you're watching SLPeasinaPod, episode 3.
Woo! 3 episodes for 3 little peas.
That's right. So welcome to our 3rd episode, everyone. If you've been watching so far, thank you so much. We appreciate all of your support and are so excited to dive into this next episode. And this episode's all about
Praxis
and grad school.
Yep. Mm-hmm. We asked you guys some questions about asking us questions, and we are going to answer them all. Yeah. So we'll just dive right in.
Fun.
So I'm just going to go through the questions, and we're all going to answer them. Is that okay with everyone?
Sounds good to me. Yadi?
It's good with me.
All right. So our first question is, what resources should I invest in before starting graduate school in the fall?
Yeah, aside from the actual required stuff, get yourself a planner, bunch of pens, post-it notes. Post-it notes are nice. Stick them on your laptop, on your planner, on your textbook, anything that you need to remind yourself. I'm a post-it note fiend. I find them everywhere still. I don't even remember what they were from. They're just like laying around. That's as far as like school supplies that I would go with. If you are going to be starting clinic, I would find out what your clinic already has. Look at what you already have, like even your old kids' toys, old books from when you were younger, if you still have them around, like get them out, look at them. And if there's one thing I would say, invest in if your clinic doesn't have it, is a laminator. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Oh, you're spot
like
on.
Maybe depending on like the one I got on Amazon, I think it was like $20. You buy the sheets, and then a thing that a lot of us SLPs have to do is, because every kid is so different, every material is made specifically for the kid. And sometimes you're always making your own stuff. This way you get to keep it. And not only that, like, especially now in the time of Corona, laminated papers are easy to wipe down. They're less likely to rip if you have a client that's more behavioral or just really little, or really old. Someone who's elderly and you're in a nursing home, that's great. You can put it on the tray right next to their dinner. If they accidentally spill it, they can still tell you, I need to go to the bathroom. It's fine. So, yeah, that is my favorite piece of equipment, is my laminator.
I would have to agree with both of you. I think the only things I would probably add, and this is like the aspiring med SLP in me, is a clipboard. And there is this really amazing clipboard, which I think what I'm going to do is make a list of everything that we've talked about and possibly some Amazon links that it's easier for you guys to find if needed. But there's this really tiny clipboard that has like all things speech on it that you can fit right into your pocket, like your white coat pocket. So that's one thing I definitely recommend. What is it called?
Pen light.
A pen light.
Yeah.
Pen light.
Forgot about that too.
Love the pen lights. Probably.
Or I'll neck it up.
Yep, or I'll make it up. Probably, is it called a lanyard, like for your ID badge or something?
Yeah.
Or like a
some
clip.
places will give you a lanyard, but if they allow you to get fancy with it, pick your favorite.
Yeah, a badge clip. I loved my badge clip. It was easy to clip on to whatever I was wearing, wherever I was going. Because we did have so many different placements, and clinic, it's so much easier. And if you have a little kid who is distracted easily, buy it. You just clip it on and off, and it's out of your way and out of their reach. So that's something I'd recommend for sure.
Definitely invest in a lunchbox that keeps your stuff cold if you don't have access to a fridge or a microwave or whatever, because you never know. Like, there were days where we would have a lunch break, but sometimes like a meeting would come up or you need to see a professor, and sometimes it's just nice to have your own lunch. You can't rely on running to the cafeteria when you are in grad school. So lunchbox, I think, is also like, I know it sounds very kindergarten, but like, pick out your lunchbox. Yeah.
A water bottle.
Do you remember that day in class where we went over like meditation and we all shared like apps and ways that we relaxed? Like, look into some of those if you ever need like a way to just calm yourself and breathe.
Teachers Pay Teachers is one of the best resources you can possibly use in graduate school. And let me tell you why. Here's why. I found 98% of my materials for all my clinic sessions for free. And the reason why I did that was because I would type in something simple like 3rd grade lesson or 3rd grade language activity, and then what I would do is I'd either make that activity my own, so I would like use certain pictures and put different words on it, or I would even just use the way it's supposed to be used. And it was free, and I printed it multiple times, laminated it, kept it in those whiteboard erasable like packets. Gracie has a ton of those, and that's how I got through grad school without spending like too much money on clinic materials, because yeah, you have clinic games, but sometimes you just need an old-fashioned like worksheet or old-fashioned drill play. How can I best prepare for clinic? This is a good one.
Besides all that stuff we just learned.
Right. So we did talk about teachers pay teachers. I know that there's diagnostic textbooks and like treatment textbooks that your school usually will encourage you to buy the specific one. I mean, also for clinic, especially when you're doing evaluations, you have to look at the resource manual to the test that you're given. So you have to look at really the key things of what the ceiling is, what the basal is, like all the things that you need to know when you're doing the test. And also practice and put the sticky notes to what you should say during a specific section of your evaluations. I hope we're not like bombarding them with like a lot of overwhelming things, right? Yeah.
So I think it's that you guys would benefit from utilizing, whether you choose to do that your first week of grad school or the middle of your year. I think these are good things to keep in your pocket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and off of what Yadi said, there's the most important thing you could do is give yourself time when you're nervous. If you know you have an upcoming eval, find out what it's like and give yourself time to learn the test, figure out like for this age range, what am I expecting to see? Give yourself kind of a initial rundown in your mind, like a list of things that you want to see, a list of things that you're hoping not to see, but if you do, what could that mean? Is that a red flag? Is that like keep your own little like checklist or something? You slip it under your clipboard.
You know, there's also a lot of videos of people doing tests. So whenever you feel like you're uncomfortable about a specific test or you haven't practiced it that much, look at the videos, see what other people's process is, and that will also help. But overall, you really learn as you go. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's always going to be nerve-wracking in the beginning. You're always going to feel the little butterflies, and it's going to take a while for you to feel comfortable. But you get the hang of it and you learn from your supervisors, and they're a huge resource for you too. So right before you have your first session, use them. Like ask them what they usually do, what the child likes, look at the chart, and just like plan yourself, because if you could plan yourself, you would feel a little more comfortable, even if you have to sometimes throw the plan away. But if you plan and you figure out like, okay, this is what I need, these are all the materials that could be useful, this is how the child presents, and this is what my supervisor gave me, all these things can help you.
Right. And if you're one of those people that needs to feel like you're prepping even when you don't have, like you don't have a client yet, but you want to prep, a fun game that I think Arva actually also had a grad teacher that did this. Undergrad teacher that did this too. I know at least one at Iona with us did. She would say, literally pick up an object or pick up a toy and think of 3 activities you could do with it. And I still sometimes to this day, I'm like, okay, I'm going into a new session with a new client. I don't know anything about them. I'm going to bring in a very general toy like a farm with farm animals, coloring pages. Like, and I just start thinking like, what can I do with this? Following directions, you know, WH questions. Just like general things that could globally help you later on. If you're a planner like that, play that little game with the toys you have in your house. Or you're an adult, you probably don't have toys in your house, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, you're right, Gracie. My undergraduate clinical supervisor, who I adore to this day, had told us once in class, I don't know if I'm even quoting her correctly, but if I remember, she had said, what do you guys see? And she held up a paper bag in her hand, and she said, a good SLP can tell me 5 goals they can target with this paper bag. And I remember we were just like juniors at this point, or seniors, and we were all like, a paper bag. What can you target with a paper bag? And now when I think about it, I'm like, you can target tons of things with a paper bag. Tons of things. Spatial directions. You could target following directions. You could target color, in, out. So many things you can do.
questions.
Turn it into a puppet and do pretend play.
Exactly. So now I'm like, wow, I think that was like the best thing to say to us. So I definitely like love that idea of like looking at toys. And one thing that I always did in my clinic or in our clinic is that I would take a game and I would make it my own all the time. I can't tell the amount of times I told someone in the clinic, grab, hit the hat, which is a great game, by the way. And it's used for like following directions, but I used it for drill play. I used it for multisyllabic sounds. I used it for color. I used it for so many things. And that's not what's on the box. So it's kind of just like your flexible thinking and just critical thinking that way. But something I do recommend is this. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's the Linguasystems Communication Milestone Guide. It's a free book. I'll definitely link it into our Google Doc. And it has all the milestones. We're talking sounds, the development of sounds, what they should be doing communication-wise, so like babbling, CV strings, CVC strings, all that fun stuff. And it's free. And I use it for a lot of my evals as a first year, and I think it's the best thing you could possibly own. And I have it like laminated as a book, so it's super easy for me to like get to. But that's just like the type A in me doing that.
Awesome.
So those are definitely some great resources. And if we have any more, we'll definitely share those as the episode goes on, or even on our account. All right, next question. Different planner options. Yes, so I was also like gung-ho on paper planners since like I was in college. I loved getting my new planner every year. However, I transitioned to digital planning like halfway through our last year of school, and I love it. I use, there's a girl on Instagram, her name is Jess Massey, and she has a company called Hustle Sanely, and she has a free digital planning guide that like is like a good way to practice and see if you like digital planning. So I use that and I love it. I think it's great. The reason I like it because I have an iPad that's always on me. It's a lot easier for me to carry than a planner that's heavier and like a lot bigger. I also like to cross things off with my iPad pencil. I get the same feeling as if I was crossing something off on paper, but I waste less paper. So that's why I love digital planning, but I could totally see how I could use both at the same time because I ended up doing that half the time too, is do both. The iPad was more of like, what's my to-do list for the day, like including what to do at home, like laundry, make my bed, go to the grocery store, plus like do assignment number 1, do assignment number 2, study for quiz number 3, and then I also had it on a marble board on my wall, similar to Gracie's adhesive, and then I also had it in my planner. Was that too many things? Probably. Did it help? Yes. So I think it's just whatever feels good to you.
I think when you're in grad school, there's just a lot going on, and you need to figure out like whether it's 10 different things or one way that you remember everything. You'll figure it out. You'll see what works for you. I think all of us needed multiple things to keep us on track. So, yeah.
Definitely. All right, next question. Okay, so this is kind of a multi-question within a question. 1, how to prep for the Praxis. 2, talk about comps. And 3, talk about your externship experience. So why don't we start with Praxis stuff first?
But RB and I actually took it in December, so it was before we had to take our comps. Usually what people do is they'll wait until they're done with their comprehensive exams because that way they can you're studying all the material, so that would help you for the Praxis. For me, it was tough just because I was at a hospital placement, and then I had class the other 2 days of the week that I wasn't at the hospital. So I just was juggling so much at that time. For me, I got the ETS. I think it's ETS, the study book. Was it, or was it Kaplan?
It was, hold on, I think I have it it's right next to me. It's the Advanced Review of Speech Language Pathology by Rosemary McKibben.
There it is.
I love Celeste Rosemary McKibben, one of my favorite people ever.
Right. So that, I think all 3 of us had that book.
Oh, this is the pocketbook, by the way.
Yes.
Super helpful for diagnostics and for comps.
Can you read
it?
We'll
get to that.
Read the title.
This is called Treatment in Speech Language Pathology. Oh, wait, just kidding. This was the treatment guide. There is also a diagnostics one. Sorry. This is the treatment guide.
We'll definitely make it for everyone. I think that would be easier than just like trying to write this all down.
Right.
I know. I figured that reading through the textbook was just like not helping me, so I preferred to do the practice questions at the end of the chapter. That way I knew like, okay, I'm not really doing so great in this, and then I would look into reading page to page. But I did more practice questions at first. So that's kind of how I tackled the textbook and all the topics. What about you, Gracie?
Very, very similarly. Yeah, I took mine in February. And I think I probably should have given myself more time, but people kept saying, it's, all this stuff. It's just a summary of everything you know. And in my head, I was like, yeah, I know all this stuff. And so I think I gave myself about a month before to start actually seriously prepping. Like, not just like, oh, what's the Praxis question of the day, but seriously prepping. And I did what Eurista did. Went through all the practice questions at the end of the textbook. The sections I didn't know, those were the ones that I read, but rather than read them all, you did just take that class. Like, you should kind of have studied this already. Don't waste all of your time rereading and rereading. And then also, the book, if you buy a new one, that we recommended, comes with practice tests online, which are very helpful. They have, I think it's like, is it 12? No, 4 full-length ones. There's some full-length ones. There's 12 full-length ones? 12 full-length ones,
25.
plus like individual subject ones, which are like 25 questions each. And then they have them broken down based on like, is it diagnostic? Is it treatment? Is it like, and that was helpful to know like where your weaknesses are. So you know what you need to kind of figure out. Because yes, they're not going to be the exact same questions that were on your practice tests. But something I did notice was that the questions that I got wrong sometimes were because I didn't know the other options. Like, I would go with the answer that maybe I saw that I knew what A was, and it kind of had to do with the question, but I didn't know B through D. So I went with A, and A was wrong. So I had to physically look up what each one of the other ones were. And then wouldn't you know it, come Praxis day, it happened with like at least 2 questions on the actual test that were about something that I looked up that was just a question answer on a practice test. Like, it might not be the same question, but they're asking for the same amount of knowledge. Just going to reword it and ask a different thing. So whatever you don't know, that's what you study. Just figure out what you do and what you don't. Right, Arva? You got anything?
No, I did a very similar study method. I was sporadically studying for a month before the test, as in I had the book and I was taking a quiz here and there, but then the last 2 weeks before the exam, I actually went into like an in-depth study mode. But my tactic was basically just to read chapters I wasn't familiar with / hadn't taken yet. So I hadn't taken fluency yet. So that is a chapter I read thoroughly. In addition to, I had taken a course that talked about oral facial and craniofacial anomalies and all that stuff, but I didn't feel super confident. So I read that one as well. But then the rest of the time, I just kind of took all the practice quizzes at the end of each chapter. And the way that I went was, if I got below an 80 on that chapter, I would refresh my memory and read the chapter. If I got above an 80 in that chapter, I would tell myself, great, move on. I was trying not to like sit there and marinate in all the information that I was gonna not know. So I thought that was the best way to do it. And then I also took the practice tests.
It's hard. It's hard.
Then I took all the practice exams on the Praxis exams online that were attached with the book. So I took all the miniature ones, which were 25 questions, and then I did 2 full-length ones, and I felt relatively confident going into it. Once I finished the test, and I was like, okay, it was hard, but it wasn't bad. And then I was like, okay, and I passed. So it was great. Like, took it once, passed, and then I was happy. So if you want to take it earlier than everyone else, I say go for it.
So we all passed.
Yeah, we all
passed. Yeah.
And all of the practice tests are a lot harder. Like, keep that in mind. Like, do not get discouraged. The more practice tests you take, and you're like, my scores just are not where I want them to be. Like, I know Arva said if she got an 80, that's when, like, you move on. I still think that, like, you could give yourself a curve of, like, a 70. Like, that test All practice tests are so hard, and they pick the hardest questions from every praxis to put in the practice questions. The actual one will give you some throwaways. I'm pretty sure I had like a question that was like, what's the area of study for a swallowing disorder? And like A, dysphagia, B, speech and language. I was like, hang on a second, like really? This is a question? Like dysphagia, next. Like some of them are not, and some of them will be hard. I'm sorry. Like some will be hard. Not all of them will be what is dysphagia, but that won't be on a practice test. Like that question will never show up.
Yeah, but I think we'll get into more depth about the Praxis on our trivia night next week.
Awesome.
Next question was, can you talk more about comps? So I do want to say, before we even get into talking about comps, is that comps are different at every school. Everyone does it differently. Some people do multiple choice questions. Some people do clinical cases. We'll talk about our experience, but don't take what people say like the end all be all. Like you don't know how your experience is going to be like, and you don't know how you're going to prepare. So just kind of listen to what your school has to say and prepare as best as you can. But Yuritsa can talk about her experience with the comps first.
Sure. So every school is going to be different, and I also have heard some schools not have a comps, and all you have to do is pass the Praxis, and they'll accept that. For our school, it was a random case that they were going to give you, and you had to problem solve that case in terms of treatment and evaluations. We also had a presentation component to that, and we had to present that in front of our professors, present our case basically, and what we would do with that case. In terms of preparing for it, the best thing that I did to prepare was organizing all my notes together, putting things in every class. So this is all my resources for fluency. These are all my resources for dysphagia. And so that was kind of my tactic, like organization, because at that point I had already passed my Praxis. I'd already studied all the materials that I was not as confident with. And yeah.
Kind of like what Yadi just said, is that a lot of our teachers recommended that if you are scheduling your Praxis, schedule it around the time of comp. So this way you are studying for more than one thing. Clearly you have 3 people here who did not take that advice and then took their comps like several months or like 2 months after the Praxis. But that aside, whether or not you are taking a multiple choice test or an open book case study like we did, you should never underestimate also the power of the group study. I know all of us, it's a lot to pull all those resources together. And sometimes somebody had a clinical experience where they needed EVP and they have the best article imaginable. And you wouldn't have known that unless, like you all talked about it. You're like, okay, so we had a friend, Andrew, who was like the voice guy. We were like, Andrew, what do you have on voice? Arva right here was pediatric dysphagia. Arva, what do you have on peds? I had everything about audiology. Yadi had bilingualism and AAC. Like everyone had their specialties, the things that they needed in their externships, the things they knew the most about, the classes they excelled in. What did you use when you were studying for your homework assignments? And we put all that together in a shared drive so that comps day, not only was it organized, but we knew it had been like peer reviewed and then peer reviewed. Like our actual known peers had reviewed it and used it, and it was helpful and what we would need. And I think we can all agree, but we were timed. We had 3 hours to, read a diagnose, come up with a treatment plan, and then figure everything out. In a time crunch, it's nice to be organized. And the last thing you want to do is be reading articles. It's nice when they've been pre-read and summarized for you. So if you have a nice group of friends, the power of the group study, my friends, that's the one.
So now my favorite question is about our externship experiences. I don't know about you two, but I loved mine, so I can't wait to talk about them. So diving into the information, starting with Yuritsa.
Okay, so the awesome thing about our program was that we all had different experiences. My first experience was a school placement. then we are given a hospital placement, and then we have something called the modular, which we explain that it's like 10 different things at one time. It's its own entity that you have to tackle. My hospital experience was inpatient rehabilitation and a little bit of outpatient, mostly adults. And my favorite part was that it was so many bilingual people, like so many Spanish speaking people. And then let me backtrack to my school placement. I was at an elementary school. I was seeing bilingual kids, but I was seeing a self-contained class. So I took all the kids there, and, kids with severe impairments, they were doing a lot of AAC, which is where I fell in love with AAC. And I was taught by my supervisor all that I know now, which is amazing. And I was lucky enough to do the extended school year. So we went through the summer, and that's when I got to see middle and high school kids. So at one point, I was seeing my youngest was a 4-year-old, and then I was seeing a 19-year-old. Like that was my day was just so varied, and I loved that because I was challenged. I had to really be sharp. I had to plan my materials. I had to make sure I came with the right stuff, and it was tough, but it was so rewarding, and I loved it.
In terms of like externships though that weren't modular, I had 2 really wonderful placements, and I loved them both. And one of them I was expecting to like, but the other one like shocked me a bit. So the first one that I loved was a school for the deaf in Manhattan, and it was a preschool, and there was some early intervention there. And I know I've said this before, but audiology is like my bread and butter. I love the hearing impaired population, and there was just something so wonderful about working with these kids and they were just all so cute and very honest. And I was amazing at how well they knew how to work their devices that I could barely work and were just learning how to use. So one of the kids literally would say like, oh, I hear Miss Katie, the FM's still on. It was like, you hear your teacher? And I was like, oh, sorry. Like, you'd have to work it out. Did a little sound checks, and they knew how to say, oh, this isn't working. Fix this, fix that. And I was like, you are 4 years old. And you know exactly the ins and outs of a very, very intricate piece of technology. And those kids just like, they amazed me. The second was my hospital placement, which originally we had the luxury of asking, kind of like we had meetings with our supervisors and getting placed places as opposed to interviewing. So when I had my interview about what I wanted for my hospital, I said, I really love pediatrics. And they did managed to give me a little bit of that experience where I got to do pediatric MDSs, which was very fun, kind of cute. But I was actually placed on the neuro unit, where I was amazed. I loved it so much. It was so cool to like not only learn about strokes and the way it's affecting our communication, but also seeing how it affected feeding side, what happened when they were on ventilator. Like it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. So I was kind of happy I didn't completely get what I had asked for, because I think I was surprised with just how much I loved hospitals in general. Like I thought it was like, I would like a hospital, but only with kids, until I had that experience. I was like, I don't care where I am. This is a lot of fun. So yeah.
My first placement was at the same hospital that Yuritsa had her placement in the fall. And that hospital to this day, like, will always hold such a big place in my heart. I absolutely adored being able to float between all the floors, like being in the PICU, the ICU, the inpatient rehab, doing outpatient. And honestly, like I am a bilingual individual. I speak Albanian and English, but I had a caseload of primarily Spanish-speaking clients, and I know nothing in Spanish. So I actually took it upon myself, and like they'll both laugh at me because I really tried to learn as much as I could. I would even ask Yuritsa to like translate certain passages for me, and I would like say them in Spanish because I just wanted to provide the best treatment possible. And we had, translators, and my supervisor was actually like a fluent Spanish speaker, but I still wanted to be able to do a lot of the communication myself. So like learning to speak another language a little bit and using that in therapy, and just working with a primarily Spanish speaking caseload as like a primarily English speaking individual was so difficult, but also so exciting. And like, you never knew what you expected. And I think that's what I love about the hospital, is that every day was different. You never really knew what you were going to expect or who you were going to see because patients were discharged one day and the next day you had like 3 new evals. So that was a great experience. And I had wonderful supervisors, which I'm so thankful for everything I learned there and all the experience I got to see. And then my last placement, which I think is probably my favorite placement, I have to be honest, was at a pediatric hospital. And I did the feeding program, which is an intense feeding program. So I was working there in the day patient program, which meant I saw my kiddos 4 times a day, 4 days a week. And then I also had my outpatient kiddos, which was once a week. And I would see them on different days, sometimes twice a week. That's where I truly, truly was like, this is what I meant to do for the rest of my life. So that was my like peak moment of, wow, so now I know what I want to do. And that's because I want to be in a pediatric hospital and I love feeding. Like I've said, same way that Gracie says, feeding is my bread and butter. So that placement was just a dream for me. And it got cut short because of COVID, which was like the most heartbreaking thing. But it was great. And I would have to say, like, I had some of the best experiences possible. And I think that we all actually really enjoyed our externships. So that's like one plus side. Like grad school gave us that. So okay, so this next question I think would be answered best by Yuritsa. So Yuritsa, what were some obstacles you experienced or saw, and how did you overcome them?
I was a commuter, right? So that was like that was tough for me sometimes because I had to make sure I was out of the house earlier and I didn't get that like last minute cram of studying every time we had to we had a quiz or we had something due. So yeah, that was tough for me, the commuting. I probably commuted 30 minutes. That's really not bad. But in like when you're in it, you were like, I wish I had these 30 minutes that I didn't have to like drive there. It wasn't as convenient, you know? I also had a part-time job while I was in grad school. So that's an obstacle for me in terms of time management because I was only working, a few hours a week. I wasn't working that much, but I couldn't stop working. I had to have something to pay my bills.
Those of you who are looking for a flexible job, I quit my concrete job. Like Yadi kept her job. I quit that before grad school because I can't handle that. But I took up babysitting. So something that had like late hours where like you put the kids to sleep and you can still study. Like that might be a good option for you if you still need money, but you need flexibility. Babysitting, go on like Sitter City or something like that and apply.
How difficult was grad school for you?
First semester Gracie was stressed for a whole bunch of other reasons than like third semester Gracie. Like your problems change as you go. First semester I was afraid of failing. Second semester, you didn't know what to expect. You were just anxious all the time. And then you didn't realize how good you had it until you had to like, I don't know, had 7 classes. One of them involved cutting open a body. Like second semester I was wired for a different reason. Then there's like the modular. You're stressed because you don't know where you're going and your life is a mess. And then what was the semester after that? I was stressed because we had Praxis was coming up and I was exhausted because I was commuting into Manhattan at 6 a.m. in the morning. Like it was stressed out over like sleep stress. Last semester we had COVID and I was chill. I was like, finally we're home. Like it was fine. So it depends on each person, where you are, what you're doing, what your program is requiring, and how you are internalizing it, because you might get better as you go. Like the problem that scared me first semester definitely didn't scare me by last semester, but a new problem will come up and if you got friends to lean on, you're going to be fine. It's different.
I really think it depends on the program is like the best way to put it. Some programs are a lot more rigorous than others. It depends on, again, like the courses that you take and like what's on your plate that semester. Some of us had a lot more on our plate than others. And what I love to say about our program is that everyone had a different like hard week, in the sense that there was always a week that Gracie was a lot more stressed than I was. There was always a week that Yuritsa had 7 things and I only had 3. Like it depended on what was going on.
For the next episode, we will be doing a Praxis trivia night with a little twist.
So if you want to be featured on the next episode of SLPeasinaPod, comment, message us, let us know. Say, I want to be featured on the show. and you could be a guest star. So we're going to ask Praxis questions. We're going to get a bunch of people ready to play, test your knowledge, and see how you do.
It's a great way to prepare for the Praxis and also have fun with the SLPs.
Yeah, and there's no pressure. We'll have some of you guys on if you'd like to come on, and we'll test each other and see what we know.
Yeah.
We might have passed, but we can still get some of these questions wrong too. So we'll do it together. Please don't forget to follow us. On SoundCloud, we are SLPeasinaPod. On YouTube, we are SLPeasinaPodcast. So like, subscribe, comment below. You know we love to see what you think. On Instagram, you can follow us all as a collective pod. We are SLPeasinaPodcast. Or individual P's, you've got Arva T SLP, Gracie Z SLP, and Yuritsa SLP.
Thank you all so much for watching this episode, and thank you so much if you've been supporting from the beginning. We're so excited to see you guys in the next episode of SLPs in a Podcast. Thank you so much.
Good night. Or bye. I don't know what time of day they're watching.